All right, it's going to be a great interview tonight. Bob Collymore, CEO Safaricom, first time back after 9 months. Let's get a couple of things out of the way. Number one, revenue last year for Safaricom, 200 billion shillings. Profit, 55 billion shillings. If Safaricom was to sell this company to someone today, it would be worth 10 billion US. No wonder they paid, my guest today, 196 million shillings last year. Good Lord. We'll get to that in a moment. 196. Let me just internalize it. Bob, welcome back.
You know what I'm finding funny?
What?
The fact that you're looking at a blank screen. There is actually nothing.
And I'm reading statistics,
on that
right?
Screen.
Isn't that cool, though? Isn't that cool?
It's good to be back.
Welcome back, man.
Thank you.
I mean, we were many of us, your friends and everyone out there, we were very worried. And obviously, you discovered you had cancer, right?
Yeah.
Take it from there. How did you discover? I mean, you don't wake up one day and say, geez, I think I have cancer.
No, I think I had been feeling unwell for a while. You know, Kiprona Katoni came to see me when I was in London, and he says, "We just thought you were getting boring." I said, "Kip," he said, "because you're skipping functions in the evening and stuff like that."
Yeah.
So I was feeling tired. I was running temperatures from time to time, but the temperatures didn't last very long. So it'll last like 24 hours, and then I'd be okay. When I was finally diagnosed in London, he said, "You probably had this thing for about 6 months." So that takes me back to the first symptoms I saw when I was in Morocco. I went to something there, and I had this kind of flu-y thing. I noticed a strange thing. I noticed the pain in the bones of my shin, which is not something you experience unless you kick something hard. And so eventually I was in Chamonix, and I had the shakes. I was really like this one evening, and my wife on board said, "I think you've got malaria," because she's really, really good at self-diagnosis. So she called her mom. I know I'm going to get into serious trouble when I get home tonight. She called her mom, and her mom said, "Yeah, it's probably malaria. Go get some medication." But anyway, I finally went to a doctor back here in Nairobi, who said, "I think you're vitamin D deficient. Here are some supplements." I said, "Look, okay, let me go see a proper doctor." So I went to Dr. Silverstein at Nairobi, and he ran a series of tests. He said, "Because I don't know." So he did about 30, I remember the number now, 30 different blood tests. I know that because it cost me $1,000 just for the test, and I had to pay there. You know what Nairobi
Yeah, correct.
And he said, "Look, I don't know what the problem is, but I need some more tests, so I need to admit you as soon as I can." It's actually the first time I'd ever been admitted in hospital. And so I went in on the Monday, and he said, "I need to do a bone marrow aspirate." I didn't know what that was. I said, "Sure." I said, "It sounds painful." He said, "That'd be fine." And so they actually take some bone marrow out, and they test it. And he said, "Okay, so I think you have a problem with your blood. I'm not the expert on the subject, so I want to refer you to an expert, but I need to get you out of here pretty soon." And I said, "Well, sure. I mean, I've got the elections are coming up, and that was a fairly noisy time. And then I've got the year end coming up the week after that, so I'll go soon after that." He says, "No, I'd like you to go like tonight, if I can." So then you start to think, well, maybe this is a little bit serious. So I went to London, and the diagnosis was a thing called acute myeloid leukemia, which is a rare form of blood cancer, but curable. So I met a fantastic hematologist there, Donald. And so Donald talked me through it, and he says, "Look, I think the thing with this disease is that it's a little bit late onset, and usually people are not fit enough to go through the regime that I'm going to put you through." He says, "I think you're fine. Your heart is fine, your lung is fine, your kidneys are fine, the liver is fine. So I think we'll put you through this, but it's going to be a little harsh." I said, "Look, how long is it going to take?" He says, "Realistically," he says, 6 to 9 months. And that was the biggest shock. So being diagnosed with cancer, for me, actually wasn't such a big deal. A lot of people seem to think that that's a bit strange, but for me it was, you got cancer, you got cancer. You can't undo it. He says it's a curative program, but it'll be 6 to 9 months. And I thought, this is going to be tough. So he says, we want to start the chemotherapy as soon as we can, which is in the next couple of days or so. So then you had to tell people. You know, I came back and I told the team. Well, I came back, I called the team and told them, and then we start to put stuff in place. The interesting thing was when I said to my wife that I'm going to London, she says, well, okay, when are we leaving? I said, you're coming? She said, well, of course I'm coming. I said, right. So when should we book your return flight? She says, the same time as you. I said, oh, we don't know how long it's going to take. And I honestly, I thought it was going to take at that time maybe 8 weeks or so. So she says, no, I'm coming. I said, what about everything here? She says, you know, we'll fix that. And when we were told it was 6 to 9 months, you know, being a Safaricom person, you know, we would then think, yeah, but we can probably do it in 5.
In half that time, yeah.
So it actually turned out to be 9 months and 2 weeks.
So acute
myeloid leukemia.
Yeah. Which means what? Bone marrow
So what it means is that the a bit of an expert on the subject now. Yeah. It means that you know, your cells in the blood, they start out as stem cells, and then they grow and they become what they call blast cells, and from there they either turn into red cells or white cells. And what was happening is that they weren't moving from being blast cells; they were just staying like that. So my white cells weren't being produced. And if your white cells are not being produced, then you can't fight infections. And this is why I was getting this kind of shakes in temperature. So the first thing you have to do is you have to get rid of the blast cells, which are the cancerous cells. So they put you through 2 cycles of chemotherapy, and it's like 3 chemotherapy a day for 10 days, which is a bit harsh. But it's not as bad as people who are doing it like every few days. And you and I will remember the young lady, Rose.
Yes,
Rose Nasimiyu, who was doing it like every few days. And you know, you go through this huge dip. Yeah. Whereas I didn't have a chance to go through the huge dip. You know, 3 times a day, the chemotherapy is in there. And you just have to kind of brace yourself. And after the second cycle, it was fine. You know, I was in complete remission, which took me to about January, February, I think. And then I said, good, now we go home, right? He said, well, you can go home, but if you go home, I will guarantee you that in 6 months' time, which happens to be right about now, he says the cancer will be back and it will be worse than it was when you came. And then I don't think that I can put you through a curative program. I think that we're just going to have to maintain you on chemotherapy until, you know,
until you die. Okay. Take me back a little bit, because you're taking it very lightly here that, you know, you went through the chemo and all that stuff, but it must have been scary for you at some point. You must have thought, I could be dying here.
Yeah, I mean, you do think. I mean, there was a point when you think, okay, so I might not come back, and then you look at the options, because you know I'm one of the people who believe that when I die, actually I want to be cremated, and pretty quickly. So that long drawn out process, and figured out that the average cost of a funeral in Britain is about $3,000, which is probably about 4.5. But whatever, in shillings.
Yeah.
So I kind of figured that out and decided that I really must get my affairs in order. Now, a colleague of mine, just before I was diagnosed, Barak came to see me, and he